Thank you. Thank you very much and welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pcwa and welcome to Threshold of Hope, a program where we bring you the writings of the church. Before we get to that, I want to mention that today is the feast of Saint Monica. Now, this is a saint that we need lots of devotion to. She had a couple of sons, at least, that we know of. Married Patricius, who was a minor official, minor landowner, and major adulterer and drunk. Tough guy to be married to. And her oldest son, Augustine, was a brilliant kid, absolutely brilliant. And with the help of, some friends of the family, he was able to go get a good education in Carthage. They were from North Africa. But the problem was he was disappointed in many ways, and it seems in his family life. He was angry with his father for being so unfaithful and mean to his mother, being such a drunk and running around. And yet at the same time, he did that. He had his own girlfriends and shacked up with one for 14 years, had a baby with her without bothering to marry her. Because he was looking for somebody better. He joined a cult. Monica had raised him with faith as a boy, but as a teenager, he became cynical and thought he knew everything. But her constant prayers and the various disappointments of some parts of his life, and most especially meeting up with the Bishop of Milan, helped to turn him around to come back to the Catholic faith. But he himself admits in his confessions that there's no underestimating the power of his mother's prayers. And many of you, a lot of you, have children who are fooling around sexually and some of you have spouses that are unfaithful. And some of you are dealing with children joining cults and claiming they're agnostics and atheists and all sorts of other things. Her son went through it. She prayed him through it. And to look to her as someone whose prayers were answered, and therefore seek her intercession in dealing with your family members. This is going to be very, very important for the future of their souls and for your own peace as well. All right. We are now going through Fides et Ratio. Fides et Ratio by Blessed John Paul is available in paperback. You can get that from EWTN's Religious Catalog, which just go to EWTNreligiouscatalog.com, or you can call them 1-800-854-6316. Or if you wish, you can download a free electronic copy from our document library at our website, which is EWTN.com. When you go there, hit the Faith tab, you'll see Documents Library, and then click that on and type in Fides et Ratio. It'll come up. You can download it into your computer for free. You can read it from your computer or print it out, which is not free. You have to pay for your own paper and your own ink. All right. Now, of course, we would like you to be involved in our show. You can do like these nice folks have come all the way from Utah and Florida and Virginia to be here in our audience in Birmingham. Or you can send us a question by writing to threshold@EWTN.com. Or you can call during our live broadcast, which is Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And the phone number is 1-800-221-9460. Now, if you're outside the United States or you are right here in Birmingham, just call our number here, 205-271-2980. And the country code, of course, is 1. I was in Australia back in '94, and they were complaining, you mean you Americans have number one on that too? I said, well, we invented the phone. At least one of our citizens did. So there. All right, we are now in chapter 2, which he uses a Latin title for, Credo ut intelligam. Now, credo, of course, means I believe. That's what we call it. The credo at Mass means I believe. Ut intelligam means so that I may understand. Now, that's something that the modern world finds very difficult to understand. That belief comes before understanding. And we're going to discuss that. Now, this paragraph 16 begins a section that goes all the way on through paragraph 20. And this is entitled from the Book of Wisdom, chapter 9, verse 11, where it says, wisdom knows all and understands all things. And she will guide me wisely in my actions and guard me with her glory. Now, remember, this is wisdom, not mere knowledge. Knowledge is when you acquire a lot of facts, which is good. I'm in favor of getting your facts and getting them straight. I grew up watching Dragnet, and Sergeant Friday would say, just the facts, ma'am. And this is what we want. But wisdom is the ability to make sense of the facts. That's when the facts are not just dots. Wisdom connects the dots and makes a whole picture. So that's what we want wisdom for. Now, he begins with a very basic principle. Sacred Scripture sees with very clear cues that the two types of knowledge we've been talking about, the knowledge that comes from faith and the knowledge conferred by reason, these are two kinds of knowledge, and that they are closely, deeply related. They're not separated. It's like you have your faith life over here and your life of reason over here, and they're two separate worlds. No, they shouldn't be. What we see in the wisdom literature of the Bible. Now, what do we mean by wisdom literature? These are the books that are based on human reflection, but also are inspired by God. So some of the wisdom books include the book of Proverbs, the book of Sirach, the wisdom of Solomon. These are the positive forms of literature, of wisdom literature. The book of Ecclesiastes, or Kohelet, is a cynical book of wisdom, where he looks at the futility of things. And his theme is Hevel, Hevelim, Hakol Hevel. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And but that's a wisdom book, and it brings some important points. And then also the book of Job is another wisdom book. And then there are all kinds of proverbs and other wisdom psalms. A number of psalms are wisdom psalms, especially the alphabetical ones. That was a wisdom device. Amos is very much full of wisdom tradition. So is Deuteronomy and other places. So it permeates the Bible, but there are at least 5 books that are designated as wisdom books. And that's where you see the relationship between the knowledge that comes from faith and the knowledge from reason, most clearly brought together. Now, what the Pope finds striking about these biblical texts is that if you read them without prejudice, in other words, don't be cynical yourself. Don't start off with cynicism. But if you read them without prejudice, you see that they embody not only the faith of Israel. Now you see the Lord is mentioned very frequently in the wisdom literature. A very basic principle is fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. That's a good start. That's hard for a lot of moderns to understand, but that's a very basic principle. But you also see in the wisdom literature a treasury of the cultures and civilizations of the ancient Near Eastern world. For instance, there's a section in the book of Proverbs that is taken, it's basically a Hebrew translation of an Egyptian book of wisdom. So it was just such good sense that they took that Egyptian book and it's just incorporated in the book of Proverbs. Now, how do we know that? Because once Champollion, back in the 1820s, had figured out how to translate hieroglyphics, copies of that Egyptian book were found, and then translated, said, wait a minute, that's just like Proverbs. And sure enough, that was its source. Now, but even when they took that Egyptian book, they redid it from the perspective of faith in the Lord. It wasn't just taking Egyptian ideas by themselves, but filtering them through the words of faith. And also wisdom literature from Mesopotamia, that is from Babylon and Assyria, which also has a lot of wisdom literature. They use some of those things every so often. Now, sometimes they have similarities because common sense was common to a number of cultures. You don't have to be someone who believes in the Lord to come to the conclusion that 2 + 2 = 4. You may have to go to a government-run school in modern society to find out that it doesn't always. But that's because the government-run schools are encouraging students to sometimes be ignorant. But one of the things that most people figured out is that being lazy was bad and working hard was good. Working hard in the good times to store up for the bad times was good sense. Now, you didn't need to get a very long education to have your parents tell you that when you're a kid. And so you see some ideas are just part of the common store of common sense in the ancient culture, and it's passed on in the Bible too. It is also no accident that when the sacred author comes to describe the wise man, the way he portrays the wise man, not just the one who knows something, but the wise man is someone who loves and seeks the truth. Now, he quotes here from Sirach, which was written somewhere in the 190s BC. The reason we know that is Sirach's grandson translated the book into Greek and from Hebrew. And he told us that he did it, the year that he did it and how many years it was from the time his grandfathers died. So that's how we figure out it was about the 190s, BC. And by the way, we for many years we only had the Greek translation by his grandson, but among the Dead Sea Scrolls and also in the 1890s in Egypt and also at Masada, they found Hebrew copies of Sirach. So in Sirach 14, verses 20 to 27, it reads, "Blessed is the man who meditates on wisdom and who reasons intelligently." Just that as a start. To love wisdom and reason intelligently is a blessing from God. This is where reason and faith go together. He goes on, "He who reflects in his mind on her ways," that is on the ways of wisdom, "will also ponder her secrets. So pursue wisdom like a hunter and lie in wait on her paths." So this is something they should see wisdom as a game animal. And when you're hunting, You have to learn how to track, how to look for the signs of that animal. What are the indicators that there's such an animal around? What are the things that attracts an animal? Is there water? Is there food? And so on. You look for those things. So also, hunt for wisdom. When you have to set criteria, just like you look for scrapes on trees to see where bucks have scraped the trees to mark their place, and you look for other signs of where there are acorns and things like that. So also, what is it that you're looking for in wisdom? And what is it that you want as the sign somebody is wise? That's going to be key to finding wisdom. You have to know something about what you're looking for. Sirach 14 goes on. He who peers through her windows will also listen at her doors. He who encamps near her house will also fasten his tent peg to her walls. He will pitch his tent near her and lodge in an excellent lodging place. And he will place his children under her shelter and will camp under her boughs. He will be sheltered by her from the heat and will dwell in the midst of her glory. So if you start to find wisdom where life makes sense, then stay there. Go to that source of wisdom and don't go to foolishness. I'll give you as a general principle, just a certain indicator. You don't need to look long at most so-called reality shows on TV to realize that what they are doing is offering people significant amounts of money so that they will become mean, foolish, and degrade themselves. It doesn't take long. I was watching, I was getting my tires changed. First time I ever saw one of these reality shows. And here they're getting people in a somewhat public way to get into their underclothes and to get in with a whole casket full of live bugs, and we'll give you so much money if you do that. Now, what was wise about that? And I can't guarantee you, but I suspect that just as the people who win the lottery and end up in bankruptcy as a result of overspending because they don't realize how much they have, people who get money in such a foolish way that degrades themselves are probably not going to spend it well. I would bet few of them used it for an advanced degree in college. Just a suspicion. Paragraph 16 continues. So, for Sirach, the inspired writer, we see the desire for knowledge is characteristic of all people. Now, this is something that is really important with little kids. Little kids are always asking, sometimes to their parents' distraction, why, Mommy? Why does it this way? And why does it, and you go on and on and on with all these questions. But that indicates that a child is inquisitive. It's part of human nature to want to figure out the world you live in, to know more about that. And this is important. We're made to crave knowledge. We're not made to be dumb. And intelligence enables everyone, both believers and unbelievers, to do as it says in Proverbs, one of the wisdom books, chapter 20, verse 5, that the purpose in a man's mind is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. In other words, when you start to pursue knowledge, you will do what my father told me when I was a little boy. And it didn't make sense to me as a little boy, but it made more sense as I got older. Namely, the more you learn, the more you realize how little you know. When I was a little boy, I figured, what do you mean? That doesn't make sense. The more you learn, the more you're going to know more, and that'll be better. But as you start learning more, you say, wow, you start learning math. And it's not just addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. It moves into algebra 1, algebra 2, trigonometry, and so on, calculus. And then I said, oop, that's too deep for me. I didn't get that. And it goes on with any other area. No matter, you start to study history, which I strongly recommend, because today's cultural leaders encourage people to be ignorant of history. And when they want you to be ignorant about something, that means you better learn it. You better learn it. When they say, oh, don't worry about that, doesn't matter. It's all stuff in the past. Learn it. Like I saw on the news the other day, just last night, there was a little news thing where they asked a woman in her mid-20s, when did we get independence from England? 1776. 20-some years old. That's why they had that show, Are You Smarter Than a Fourth Grader or Fifth Grader, whatever that is. So learn your history, because they don't want you to know it. It is true that ancient Israel did not come to knowledge of the world and its phenomena by way of abstraction, the way the Greeks did. And that partly has to do with language and a number of other issues. That Hebrew mentality was much more concrete, whereas Greek culture lent itself to a variety of questions about the meaning of about the nature of the world, not the meaning of the world, the nature of what the world is. Again, I strongly recommend that you take a look at Edward Facer's book, The Last Superstition, which is a great debunking of atheism. He just takes the atheists down to the mat and pins them. But in that, he shows how the Greeks' approach to abstract thought was part of their culture. And they gave us a wonderful legacy. And this was especially true of the Greek philosophers. He mentions also the Egyptians. I don't find the Egyptians quite as interesting thinkers as the Greeks. The Egyptians had a little bit more focus on real practical running of the bureaucracy and the economy. And they knew bureaucracy. You'd almost think they'd live in modern America. They had such a big bureaucracy. But they were a little more practical, whereas the Greeks, thought more deeply than the Egyptians did, I think. Still less did the good Israelite understand knowledge in the way modern world tends to see it. In the modern world, we tend to distinguish different kinds of knowing. And in Hebrew, the word know is used for all kinds of things. Not only for knowing this truth or that truth, knowing wisdom, but even a man would know his wife in order to conceive a child. So they use the word know in a very broad range of idioms, whereas the Greeks were a little bit more specific. Nonetheless, the biblical world made its own distinctive contribution to the theory of knowledge, and it's going to be important. They may not think like everybody else, but that doesn't mean you disregard them. This is something that, one of the great things about knowing history and knowing about the past, you get perspective on the present that you can't get from living in the present. So knowing these other cultures and comparing some of them is I find very useful. And you can get all this stuff in English today. You don't have to know all these other languages. Now, what is distinctive in the biblical text? So what's their distinctive aspect of knowledge? For them, it is the conviction that there is a profound and indissoluble unity between the knowledge of reason and the knowledge of faith. Now see, the Greeks would not come to that conclusion. Matter of fact, that's one of the reasons why Socrates was condemned to death for atheism. He wasn't an atheist. He believed in God, but he didn't believe in the specific gods, but in something that was beyond all the different pagan gods. See, the pagan gods were gods of the storm, Mother Earth, and the sea, and so on and so on. Diana for the moon, Mars for the planet Mars, and for God of war, and so on. That he didn't believe. But in Israel, they could see, wait a minute, God is the creator of everything that exists. There are no other gods. And that he created everything in wisdom. And the wisdom that exists in the world is put there by an infinitely wise God and an all-knowing God. And this is one of the things that's key for understanding the Bible, God created human beings in his own image and likeness. And part of that means that we too have minds with the capacity to think, and therefore our minds make it possible for us to understand the principles of wisdom God put into the world. So, as much as I think my cats are so cool, they have never figured out how to go to the store and buy their own cat food. Now, they know how to go and hunt mice and such as that, but they have never figured out how to open a can of cat food. They meow until I do. And they don't know how to get a cup of food from the bag of food I buy for them. The closest they can get is, especially the female, she will knock her nose against the food bag when she's hungry. You know, so she's pretty clever. That's pretty, I think that's clever, as much as I expect from a cat. But it's human beings who came up with designing food that's appropriate for cats, putting it into cans and bags, and figuring out a way to get other human beings to sell it and buy it, of course. So, and open and all the rest. So this is something that is specific to us humans, to have that kind of knowledge. The world and all that happens within it, that includes history, the fate of peoples, as well as the natural phenomena. All of these are realities we are capable of observing and remembering. Animals don't remember all that much. Some of them don't remember that their own mother is their mother. But this is something that we are able to do. And that we can also analyze these realities. We can assess them. And dare I say the word, make judgments about history and our own lives. Some things we can say are bad, some things are ignorant. And in that we do this with our reason, we think these things through on the basis of principles, but without faith ever being foreign to the process. So Israel was constantly writing down its own history in a way you don't see among the pagans. When you read Assyrian history or the Babylonian history, it's always about how great the king is And if you didn't say that, the king would probably kill you for not saying it. Whereas in Israel, the sins of the kings and the commoners alike are put into the Bible. That's why it's not a good idea to want to be living at the time of the Bible. If you end up in the Bible, people read about your sins and call it church. You know, this is very different from People magazine. So this is something that they were able to bring that kind of assessment because they assessed politicians and commoners alike on the basis of did they live faith and the morals God revealed. So that's why faith goes together. Faith intervenes not to abolish the autonomy of reason. Reason has its role, you know, to teach you how to read and write, to write things down, all that. That's good. Nor does faith reduce the scope of action for reason. Faith doesn't say you shouldn't study chemistry because it's not in the Bible. You shouldn't study astronomy because it's not in the Bible. No, the Bible doesn't teach you not to study those things, and neither does the church. You do go ahead and study these things. And the churches, universities, from the beginning had departments of medicine, the rudiments of chemistry and astronomy. The church preserved the books by the astronomer Ptolemy and incorporated that. And the Vatican still runs an astronomy observatory and has for hundreds of years before any kings did. So this is what we do. But faith brings the human being to understand in these events that it is the God of Israel who's acting. That's where we see that the Lord acts in history and is involved in our lives. That's where faith comes in. We see there's a meaning beyond just the facts. Thus, the world and the events of history cannot be understood in depth without professing the faith in God who's working in them. And to look, what is God asking me to do? How is He acting in my life, in the life of my culture? Faith sharpens the inner eye to understand more deeply. And it opens the mind to discover in the events of history, the workings of providence. How is God taking care of things? So we read in Proverbs 16, verse 9, a man's mind plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. Hitler had his plans. Stalin had his plans. But that's not the way it worked out for them. This means that with the light of reason, humans can know the path they need to take. But they can follow that path to its end only if they are rightly tuned spirit. They search for it within the horizon of faith. Therefore, reason and faith cannot be separated without diminishing the capacity of men and women to know themselves, the world, and God in an appropriate way. And just, you know, we can go into this, but when you see how Lenin tried to institute atheism as the government policy of the Soviet Union, and then Trotsky and Stalin said, we're going to make this acted out. What did they do? They destroyed their own people. And in the name of their atheism and their communist ideology, killed 61.9 million people. This is what happens when they use their ideas alone. But the people of faith believed that God was with them. Many became saints. Millions were martyrs for the faith. And the church came through and still exists while the Soviet Union is dead. That we learn from all this. We'll come back in a couple minutes. I want to get some of your questions and your comments, so please stay with us. Welcome back, and we have a group of folks over here from Virginia, and Florida, and Utah, and we'd love to have you come and join us as well. So if you can make a pilgrimage here, please contact our pilgrimage department. The number is 205-271-2966. Or you can also go to our website, www.EWTN.com, and they'll give you information about the various times of programs, when our mass schedule, both here and in Hanceville, directions to get up to Hanceville to be with the sisters, and also information about tours of the studios, information, places to stay, good places to eat. This young lady lives down in Montgomery. She has to make sure her family gets here to try some of our Alabama barbecue. You know, so you know what to do with a big old chunk of meat. So we have Golden Rule, very religiously themed restaurant, and a variety of others here. So please come and join us. Also, we're still taking folks to go over to Israel for Christmas time. We'll be leaving on the 15th of December and returning on the 26th. And we'll spend Christmas Eve in Bethlehem all day and have Mass that night in Bethlehem. And so if you can join us, we invite you to certainly get a hold of the travel agent at 1-800-554-4556, 1-800-554-4556, or you can also go to my website, FatherMitchPcwa.org, and that'd be a good thing. All right, let's go now to a caller. We have Caleb on the line. Hello, Caleb.
Hi, Father Mitch Pcwa. Can you hear me?
I hear you just perfectly. Where are you from?
Clearfield, Pennsylvania, from the Diocese of Erie, if you know anybody up there.
Oh, I've been up that way, sure. And what's your question?
How do we get Protestants involved in the church that, you know, how they say that we worship Mary and all that, but we don't, and Catholics that, you know, they're falling away from the church?
Yep.
Get them involved in it. EWTN is good, but how do we go beyond that? Like a street evangelization or something?
Yeah. You know, Caleb, this is something on a variety of levels that we can do. I really see in my own life on a regular basis. Just this morning, I was working out over at the gym, and I certainly deal with folks and they ask different questions and I'm always ready to give an answer. But then, given that background, they also come and say, would you pray for me for this or that and the other thing? And it goes from a lot of times with our acquaintances. Again, this happens all the time when I'm traveling. I get out there and, some people are willing to ask a priest a question. Others are not. That's certainly there. Or yesterday, I went to the DMV to get my tag for my truck. And lady in front of me didn't speak much English, so I was talking to her in Spanish. People behind me were a group of Baptist folks, and we started talking, and they said, where do you go to church? They started asking questions. Now, this is the kind of thing that, in these different circumstances, when our Lord puts you in them, ask how he can use you. Matter of fact, just yesterday, going to the DMV, I got up early, tried to get out there and rush, and there was some terrible accident, and traffic was backed up for about 3 miles. And so I got off and took another route, then that was backed up. And I said, oh, I'm never going to get home today because it's usually a long line. But then I said, wait a minute. Hey, this accident isn't about me. It's about that person who was in the accident. They're the one whose car's damaged and they might be hurt. And it was far above from where I could see what happened, but I couldn't even get close to it. But that's about them, so I started praying for them. Secondly, I said, Lord, whom do you want me to stand next to in the line at the DMV? So that it's not just about me getting this done and getting over with. It's also paying attention to the various people I get in contact with. And then always do as St. Peter says in 1 Peter 3:15. Always be ready to give a defense. And the word he uses in Greek is apologia, a defense for the hope that you have in Christ Jesus. In these kind of circumstances, say somebody tells you, well, Catholics worship Mary. And what I would say to them, what I do say to them, if I show you in our catechism that the Catholic Church forbids us to worship Mary or any saint, we can only worship God. And that's what our church teaches. If I show you that, would you accept that we don't do that and that you have been taught a false accusation? And you need to stop that accusation and make sure you understand what we really do believe and not criticize things you think we believe. That's one of the things I would do in that kind of conversation. And then say, now what are your other objections? And by the way, all you have to do is go to your catechism and you'll see in the section on the first commandment that it's forbidden to worship Mary or the saints. So go there and check those things out. And then encourage them to pay attention to what's true. And you will learn more about your faith as you do that, Caleb. I guarantee you, you will become more informed. And study a little bit of your faith every single day. Read a paragraph or two of the catechism each day and learn just a little bit more. And you'll become more adept at being able to answer folks, not only answer their objections, but be able to show them there's something much deeper that you're going to find in the Catholic faith than you ever dreamed of. In that way, you don't have to necessarily go. Now, some people do go door to door. They're door-to-door Catholic missionaries. Talk to your pastor about that. I think Father Larry Richards is up there. He's a wild man. He'll be happy to help you with some of that. If you see him, tell him hello for me. And see what you can do. Take some time, but Lord can use you in a variety of ways in everyday life by becoming more informed and by willing to speak up and give an explanation of the faith. We have a question from our studio audience. Ma'am, where are you from?
I'm from Ogden, Utah.
Good to have you here. And your question?
We always had some debate, more my daughter and my father, about what is it? Once saved, always saved.
Okay.
Versus saved through works.
What was your father's position on that?
Well, he didn't always believe saved.
Well, he didn't always believe in once saved,
always
always saved, right?
But he kind of was changing as he got older. Mm-hmm. He passed away a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm. God rest him.
But I was not always sure exactly what it was.
Yeah. Here's,
and I'd like it.
Sure. For one thing, the statement, once you are saved, you are always saved, is not written out in the Bible anywhere. So that's not something that is stated as such in the Bible. So this is one principle. We cannot add that to the Bible. And we can't make a principle that is not there. And then St. Paul also describes how in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, he says in verse 14, if the work which any man has built on the foundation of Christ survives, he will receive a reward. If any man's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through fire. That's very important for our understanding of purgatory. And it goes on and said, let no one deceive himself. If anyone thinks you, let's see, where is it? That he adds here that I don't even judge myself. So Paul, they said there's nothing on my conscience, but I don't even judge myself. God will judge me. Now, in this section, it's very important to see. I don't, you want to avoid presuming on the fact that Christ has united me to himself through baptism in the Eucharist. You don't want to presume and say, that's, I'm just going to heaven no matter what I do. See, that's the other side. Just like some Catholics think, well, if I say I'll just go to confession, I'll be okay. And then I'll do it again and go to confession again. No, that's not right either. That's being presumptive and presuming on God. But you can have what we call in Catholicism a moral certitude. I'm committed to my faith, I love God, and I love my neighbor. And therefore I entrust my soul to God. That would, and so then, like Paul, we don't have anything on our conscience, but I don't even judge myself, as Paul says. And as I just leave myself in God's hand, but I do so trusting that his mercy is greater than my conscience. And that's where we can have a confidence, and know that God is acting. I suspect that, because he's getting close to the end of life, he was, maybe thinking about some things. And, you're saying that you were raised in a church that didn't have, the sacrament of confession. And that probably would have helped him. Helps me all the time. So that would be the sense. We have another caller. Hello, James.
Yes.
Hi, where are you from?
Pennsylvania.
Great. And what's your question?
Do we have a duty to provide physical self-defense to conceive babies being attacked by surgical abortion?
This is something that is a very serious issue because, you have to think about the means of physical protection of those children. For instance, if you tried to get into an abortuary where they're committing the abortions, you would be immediately arrested. You would not be able to intervene in the procedure. They won't let you. They would lock the doors and stop, and they have people protecting them, and of course they'd call the police. So, given that it's not physically feasible to be able to go in there and physically stop it, that's a very practical problem. Secondly, I also don't know what you could do to stop a woman from going in there. You can be present to try and talk her out of it. And this happens. There are some abortuaries where committed Christians, Catholic and non-Catholic alike, have stood out there, and someone was just telling me how there's one clinic where they saved a few thousand kids by talking the women out of it. Now, would it be morally acceptable to say, okay, I'll kidnap the women until they come to term? You're not going to get away with that. You can't do that. You'll be arrested, and that'll come to a quick halt. We have to do it, I think, another way. So I don't know of there being any concrete, practical means by which you could do that. And if it's something that is not feasible, then you may not do it. It just won't work. Okay. All right. We have Claire on the line. Hello, Claire.
Yes.
Hi. Where are you from?
New Orleans, Louisiana.
Good. And what's your question?
My question is, could Blessed John Paul II become a doctor of the church because of the luminous mysteries and because he called the church's attention that we needed a Catholic catechism and the Second Ecumenical Council?
Claire, I would not be at all surprised if Blessed John Paul does maintain the title being called John Paul the Great, along with Gregory the Great and Leo the Great. And he'd be the third one to be called the Great. And that it'll be because, as you say, of the luminous mysteries, but also an incredible amount of teaching that he's done. See, doctor is simply the Latin word for teacher. And he has taught the church an incredible amount. It's one of the reasons why I'm going through these encyclicals, because we need to understand that teaching for our own time. And he's given us a vision for the 21st century, for the church to go forward. So I myself do suspect strongly that he will be declared a doctor of the church. I think that you are on to something there, Claire. All right. Do I have time for an email? Let's start off with one from Sherry. Okay. Dear sir, I don't think she likes me. Please explain how a human can be infallible and why it is essential that a Catholic believe this precept. Thank you, Sherry. Sherry, it is possible for a human to be infallible by the grace of God. And what we depend on and I'm sure you're talking about the Pope's infallibility. His infallibility is very, specific, but he cannot change revelation. But his infallibility is guaranteed by Jesus, who says in Matthew 16, whatever you bind on earth is bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth is loosed in heaven. So by the word of Jesus Christ, we accept that infallibility. And secondly, because Jesus also promised that the Spirit of truth will lead you into all truth in John's Gospel. That promise of the Holy Spirit makes it possible for a human to be infallible. And it's essential that a Catholic believe this because Christ revealed it. That's why we believe it. So I hope that helps you, Sherry. All right, we have run out of time. May the Lord bless you and keep you, cause his face to shine upon you. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And again, as we always remind you, this show and this network is brought to you by you. You make it possible. So please keep us in between your gas bill, electric bill, and cable bill so we can pay our bills too. Thank you.